Hello ladies and germs, welcome back. Here for another video. This time we're going to be covering one of my close favourites, a movie that means a lot to me now, that I've seen a lot of times. And it's a rom-com that addresses my usual problems with rom-coms, which is something that I'm looking forward to addressing. Now this movie is called Wotakoi, Love is Hard for Otaku. Now you may have heard of this because it is originally a manga and an anime. But what you might not know is that it's a musical. So without further ado, let's get into it. So just to briefly set things off, I want to explain this a little bit because I think the term otaku, for me at least, I'm fairly familiar with it. But I understand that this is a term probably not a lot of people have heard, but it's not super complicated. It's essentially the Japanese version of what you would call a geek over here. It's not quite the same. But it's generally a similar idea. You know how you have Star Wars geeks, you would have a Star Wars otaku, someone who is generally kind of very deep into it, knows everything, is all of their hobbies are related around it, submerged into the kind of the geek pop culture zeitgeist, so to speak. Like I say, it's a little different, and that is a little bit of a glib interpretation. However, generally speaking, I think if you understand what a geek is, you can understand what an otaku is like and what they're kind of into. And this movie follows two people who were friends when they were kids, who reconnect after Narumi, the lead character of this, gets a new job and finds herself working alongside Hiro Taka, her friend from childhood. But the thing about otaku, similar to what it is over here, is that there are some people who are very judgmental, and there's some shame to be had with that. Hiro Taka is not ashamed at all, but Narumi is. And she doesn't really want anyone to know that she's an otaku. These two reconnect at their workplace, like I mentioned, and still, now grown up, they are otakus. Kento Yamazaki's character, Hirotaka, is a video game otaku. Narumi, on the other hand, is a fujoshi, which if you don't know what that means, it means she loves to see boys kiss. And do a bit more, if you know what I mean. And they decide to date each other because she doesn't need to keep it a secret around him, because not only does he already know, he's also an otaku. So they have that benefit going for them. And that's the general setup and the premise of this movie. I understand that that's very similar to the anime and the manga, but of course there are some changes. Like I said, the main one being that this is in fact a musical. The anime isn't a musical, the manga obviously can't be a musical, so it's quite a diversion. I also want to say that one of the first things that you're probably going to say to me when you look this movie up is, but Brad, look at the scores. Everybody hates this movie, it's terrible. That's not true, but it's got a pretty middling rating on Letterboxd. But I genuinely believe that this is because this movie hasn't found its audience for a number of reasons. I think the poster and the setup and the premise target a specific group of people, the kind of people who would watch the more serialized young adult K-drama rom-com type of shows. And while there might be some crossover, I don't think that really gets across the tone that you might expect from something like this. Because it's about otakus, I think you benefit more from watching it if you're somebody who is familiar with that kind of space. I think for anybody who's into any kind of fandom or geeky spaces in the West, will have no issue following up on the references. There's tons of references here and metatextual humour that I think will go across just fine. But alongside that, there's also Fukuda-style comedy. Now, if you're not familiar with Yuichi Fukuda, who directs this movie, he is one of Japan's big comedy filmmakers. A lot of his movies have this absurdist and wacky group of characters juxtaposed with very dry and very witty humour, alongside a lot of improv and similar metatextual humour. I don't know necessarily what the humour is like in the anime. I suspect that the meta stuff is probably pretty similar because it's about video games and anime and all kinds of different stuff. But I don't know if necessarily the kind of the improv, super dry, super whimsical comedy is necessarily anime. It might be. But I actually think a lot of Japanese comedy has that kind of styling. Maybe he's part of the reason why it feels that way, because I've seen a bunch of his movies, but there's a lot of comedies I watch in Japan that definitely have that same kind of dry and whimsical juxtaposition that goes on. It's the kind of thing you see in a lot of old British comedy. If you're familiar with British comedy or you like British comedy, then I could definitely see the humour in this show really working, because it's, you know, he's got the kind of Monty Python vibe, he's got Carry On vibes, you know, there's dry, witty and silly stuff like you might see in something like Father Ted, for example. And I think that a lot of people who maybe watch those kinds of movies that are similar to this, you know, the rom-com type movies, are probably not really into that kind of comedy. It's probably a lot of Americans who it doesn't really land for. But if you like those shows, then I think that you might be the right audience for it. At the same time, there's also a lot of people who just don't like musicals and weren't expecting this to be a musical. And if you're a fan of the anime or the manga, or if you're a fan of other similar shows like that, you might also be put off just by the fact it's a musical. And I think that sums up most of the negativity that you see around this movie and why it hasn't really been received that well on Letterboxd. I understand it was pretty successful in Japan. And so for me, it's a case of the right audience is out there, and they might see this movie, they might see the negative reception and go, well, Dan, this might not be good. But not realising that it's because it's a musical, it's because it's an anime adaptation, and some people are always negative about those, and it's because it's got a specific style of comedy. But if any of those things work for you, if you like musicals, if you like that kind of comedy, and you're not super worried about how close it is to the anime, although I've heard a lot of people say it's not terrible of an adaptation in terms of how it links up. I've actually heard a lot of compliments about that. But if those things aren't necessarily concerns of yours, or if those are things that you like, then you could be the audience for this movie. And I don't want you to be put off by those negative reviews. Don't listen to those reviews, listen to my review instead. So the first thing I really want to talk about when I'm delving into this movie is the music. Because I think if anyone is a musical fan like I am, you probably agree with me that a lot of musicals will live and die on the quality of the songs. If a musical has good songs, you're probably going to like it regardless of what's going on in the plot. If bad songs, then you're probably not going to like it even if the plot is great. If a movie has middling songs or just okay songs, then the movie probably is going to have to make up for it in its plot or its other elements to really make up for the fact that the songs aren't that good and they're there, because you have to like kind of justify them in a way. Now obviously music is super subjective and everyone is going to have a different opinion on what makes a good song or a bad song. But I think the first thing to notice about this movie is that it has kind of a unique soundtrack. Yuichi Fukuda is someone who has directed a lot of musical stage plays. So he has a lot of experience with this kind of genre, including the Groundhog Day musical stage play and the Beetlejuice musical stage play. You probably didn't know that they exist, but they do. Those are odd choices for musicals, but you never know, they're probably really good. He also worked closely a long time Shiru Sagisu, who of course is the composer of the Evangelion soundtrack and the Cruel Angel Thesis song that a lot of people really love. But alongside this, he's also worked on the Bleach soundtrack and countless other animes. If you're into anime in any capacity, the chances are you've heard this guy's music at some point before. So if you like his music, you're probably going to get off onto a good route. But as I say, the music in this is kind of unique anyway. It's not just anime-style soundtracks. I think when you think about a musical, or at least when I do, I have a certain picture in mind. And there's not that many Japanese musicals to really compare about. Really, there's only a few countries that really make a lot of musicals. I think you typically get a few different styles. You get the kind of orchestral and extra jazz tap and big band stuff that you might see in something like White Christmas or a Fred Astaire movie from the early 1930s or 1940s. Or alternatively, you get the more show-tuney theatre kid style stuff that you might get with like Greatest Showman or something more modern like that, Dear Evan Hansen. Or maybe you might end up with like a rock opera styling that you would see in, say, Rocky Horror Picture Show or Anna and the Apocalypse, for example. Whereas a lot of the songs in this movie are more like electro pop and dance songs. There's definitely a couple of songs that have that kind of old school ballad to it, but they're few and far between. The majority of the songs, I would say, are very upbeat, are very poppy, and are very energetic. In fact, there is even a version of Cruel Angel's Thesis remixed into some of the other songs that plays near the end of the movie in the credits as well. So definitely look out for that. So if you like that kind of genre, maybe this is going to be a good shout. If you don't like other musicals because you don't like those other genres and you like this genre, this could be the musical that changes it for you. I've had friends who don't like musicals who've enjoyed the music in this. For me personally, I find that a lot of the songs are very good actually. But also about half of the songs didn't really grab me that much on the first listen, but the more I heard them on a rewatch of this movie, they really grew on me. Especially the first song. That one really didn't land with me at first, and the more I watched it, the more that one really settled in and became a song that I really like. And now I'd go as far as to say that there's no song I don't like in it. I also think the singing is really good in this. Generally, everyone is pretty good at the singing. Kento Yamazaki is probably the weakest singer. I understand that he doesn't really come from the same singing background. I've read interviews where he's spoken about how he was very nervous to approach the singing in this because it was his first role where he ever had to do so. And you can kind of tell. There's a definite nervousness to the way he sings his lines in his solo song. But he's very clean still, and he still sounds pretty good. On the flip side of that, Narumi, who's played by the wonderful and perfect Mitsuki Takahata, her singing voice is like an angel. So you might not like the songs, or you might think middling of the songs, but I hope that you will be able to see that she's a fantastic singer and she really brings it to life. Equally, a lot of the background singers are also really good. I was personally very surprised by Nanao, whose singing voice is really beautiful. Her singing sections are great. But this is definitely Narumi's movie, and she has the most songs, and her songs are really great. Her solo song is very sweet, and her upbeat Shibuya song is great as well. The other thing to focus on about musical songs is the dances. Now, this movie was probably shot pretty quickly and probably reasonably cheaply, because in Japan they don't get huge budgets or huge time scales, even if it is like a bigger budget movie. And so the choreography is definitely one of the weaker parts. The first time I saw this especially, it took me out a little bit how very simple the choreography was, and how, like, you know, it's very much like kind of, you know, they're doing shapes, they're doing motions, but they're very simple motions, they're very simple choreography, and they're done like seemingly by amateurs, so to speak. There are a couple of moments that aren't like that. There's a tap sequence that's pretty good, but you're never going to see anything on the level of White Christmas. You know, you're not going to see Vera Ellen doing taps and swings and spins to that level ever. And even if you were, you know, you're not going to see it particularly well either. It's very simple choreography. But there are some moments that really stick out to me. In the Shibuya song, there's a dance motion where she's doing this kind of thing, and it's pretty simple, but that hand motion, for whatever reason, tickles my brain. And that's a very bouncy, upbeat song. That's a lot of fun. So I think definitely if you don't like the first song, wait till the second before you write off the entire movie. And also, if you don't mind the first song, I think it has the opportunity to grow on you. I think the songs on this will definitely grow into you as you watch them and hear them more throughout the movie. Plus the medley at the end of the movie where they play all of the songs back and remix them together is really good. I actually love the songs in this movie. I think the songs are all amazing. But the reason why I'm prefacing it like this is because, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's very subjective. You might have totally different music taste to me. You might have totally different sensibilities, and you might not like them. But I'm hopeful that if you give them a chance, you might love them. But if you don't like the first like 2 or 3, then I've got a feeling that you're not going to like the others. They're not super dissimilar, but you know how it is. I also want to point out as well, and I'm not going to show it because you'll be able to see when you watch the movie, but there is one song in there where they're literally just doing La La Land. This movie must have come out about a year after La La Land, and even the director himself has said in interviews, everybody knows what we're doing La La Land. And that's a fun sequence. You'll be able to see immediately which one it is. So the next thing I want to talk about is the comedy in this movie. For those familiar with Fukuda's other works like Gintama 2, or From Today It's My Turn, or Romance of the Three Kingdoms New Interpretation, this is a much more grounded and light comedy affair than some of his other stuff. It's not got as many jokes per minute, and the jokes themselves are just a little bit lighter and a little bit less intense and a little bit less ad-libbed. There's still some really funny moments in this. This movie has some really classy, really hilarious moments, and that's woven into all of the performances, which are all very good, and I'll get to those later. But especially with the way people physically act, where they move their faces and they move their bodies and they interact with each other, is more of an element of this than the dry humour that you might expect from some of his other works. I would say comedy-wise, it's more comedic, but a lot closer in level of amount of comedy to Once Upon a Crime, which was one of his other movies. If you've seen that, that was a big movie on Netflix when it came out. Well, big for the kind of movie it was. It got a lot of views. A lot of people have seen it. So it's not like I would say a raucous laugh out loud comedy. Most of the humor, as mentioned previously, is referential, and it's about video game stuff. I think that this has the potential to land a lot better if you're familiar with this kind of stuff. I suspect that people who are even interested in this video, who are following manga and anime, will be interested in that and will be able to get something out of it. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of Capcom references. There's a lot of Monster Hunter footage in this for some reason. And there's jokes about different kinds of animes and music and films and stuff that come into play that are quite funny. There's also a lot of that in the set dressing too. I think if one of the things that my friends got when I've watched it with them is they were big into anime and manga, and they were really eagerly looking into the background to see all of the different, plushes and cushions and wall decorations and cosplays to try and identify who the character was or which anime they were from or all those kinds of references. There were some that I didn't get, but I think even if you're in the West and you don't watch a lot of Japanese stuff, a lot of the references here are probably pretty easy to get. Like I say, there's multiple Monster Hunter ones, there's a couple of Resident Evil jokes, there's some that are just based on general tropes and stuff, there's Evangelion jokes. I can't imagine somebody who's watching an anime movie wouldn't be familiar with Evangelion. They'll probably get those. But there's some where it feels like you just have to have experienced it a little better, where they might go over your head, but it's not a big deal. The one that I think of for that specifically is they do a Dynasty Warriors joke at one point where they say a phrase that's relevant to something that happens in the game. It's one of the names of one of the moves that you can do. And I think if you haven't played Dynasty Warriors, even if you're aware of Dynasty Warriors, you might not get that, but it's kind of a throwaway thing. And a lot of the rest of the comedy, like I say, is about the awkwardness of these characters, about the goofball ways they interact with the world, about their dialogue and the way they kind of blend into their tropes. They do, video game pop-ups when they're interacting with each other and stuff. These fun little metatextual jokes that you can get that I think people will like. I think people will think they're fun. But if you're not interested in that area, maybe that won't land super well. But it does for me. I think those are great moments, and especially carried by how great a lot of the comedic performances are in this too. And it's a good intro into Yuichi Fukuda's work because it's a little bit lighter than what he usually is. So if you're somebody who gets put off when things are way too silly and you need time to get into the grips with it, this will warm you up for his much sillier movies. His Psychic Kuso live action, for example, is very silly and it's very cheap. And I think you've got to be in the frame of this is what a Fukuda movie is going to be like to get into it, because I think when you're willing to accept it and just go for the jokes, that movie is pretty good, honestly. But you might not feel that way unless you're familiar with what the comedy is going to be like. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, if you're interested in British humour and you like British humour, definitely check out some of this guy's movies. Even if this one doesn't land for you, definitely check out, say, New Interpretation of the Three Kingdoms, because that one feels a lot like Holy Grail in not only how it's delivered, but in the way the jokes are passed and the way the characters are, the way it makes fun of the historical setting. I could totally see people who love British humour loving that, even if they don't like this movie. And now I want to talk about the performances. There's several really great performances in this, but the main performance, the lead, Mitsuki Takahaya, is perfect. I don't think they could have gotten anyone better for this role. She's so funny, she's so sweet. The way she physically reacts with her face and her body is amazing. Her energy is off the charts. I think that she's super cute as well. I would say that when you watch a rom-com, one of the things that makes it work or doesn't work depends on how much you're able to fall in love with the character as well. That's the reason why those rom-coms where people have 3 different guys to choose from are so popular, because you can pick the guy that you want to fall in love with yourself and then empathize with the lead as they go through it. And I think if you are like me and you empathize with Hirotaka's character, it's very easy to see why he's falling in love with Mitsuki, and I think you can really get that appeal out of it where she's the quirky dream girl, that you want. And her performance really, really matches it. Alongside the fact that she's a great singer, she's really the main focus here, the main attraction, and she's wonderful. Really, really superb performance. One of the best I've seen. Hirotaka, on the other hand, played by Kento Yamazaki, he's a guy we're very familiar with. And Kento Yamazaki has notable flaws sometimes when he acts. I think he's generally pretty good I think Golden Kamui was his best performance. It was very, very mature and very subtle, really great. He definitely has a habit of toning things down, especially when they're based on other things. And I think in this role, I don't know what the anime was like, I don't know what the manga was like, but the character at the very least is very stern and very unemotional for a lot of the time. He's very straight-faced. I suspect that the intention was to have him be doing a lot of the wacky stuff that she likes and then be so straight-faced that that's a funny juxtaposition between it. I think he's pretty good. He's okay. And I think other people play off him well. But he's definitely toned it down maybe a little bit too much. And like I say, in the reverse, if you're somebody who is into guys and you want to see if you can fall in love with Hirotaka's character, might be a little bit more difficult. I can't really answer that question. But of course, when you read the reviews, Kento is, I guess, a bit of a heartthrob. He's a pretty boy. And so if you just like him as a heartthrob, you're probably not going to mind if his character's not that intense. And to be fair to him, he has one of the funniest moments in this movie. One of those moments where I was like, how did he even do that? How was he capable of doing that? I don't know. It's a great moment. Alongside the two leads, there are a couple of really strong performances in the sideline role as well. We have Narumi's boss, who maybe is a little bit too much in some of his more whimsical comedy scenes, but I think is really good in his gruff scenes. He makes a really good straight character for Narumi to play off, and his performance is generally very strong there. And then we have Nanao's character, who is a similar kind of character, but for Hirotaka's character in relation to him. And she doesn't really get a lot of jokes, but she does have some really great songs and some really great comedy song moments. And Nanao is somebody who I've seen in a lot of stuff now, and she's somebody who I generally am skeptical over about the quality of her as an actor as well, but I think this is probably her best performance. She doesn't really come off as unbelievable like she usually does, and some of her line delivery is really strong here. And she's, of course, a stunner, so you've got that going for you. So she actually adds a lot to this movie. I was really pleased by her performance here, having seen her a few times and not felt as strongly, and I hope that more performances I see for her, I'll be able to see this side, where they really played to her strengths. We've also got Kento Kaku, who I think a lot of people will be familiar with because he's in House of Ninjas, which was big over here. He was in the Yakuza TV show, which I know a lot of people didn't like, but that was also something that was viewed a lot in the West. Kento Kaku is hilarious. He's a hilarious guy. Now, I understand that those two roles I mentioned were serious roles. I haven't only seen him in comedies. And he cracks me up. He doesn't get a huge amount of screen time, but he steals a lot of the scenes he's in. His physical acting, the way he moves and his delivery are all perfect. He's really funny. I love to see him. And he adds a lot of great energy to this. Outside of that, there's a bunch of small background roles. Fukuda has this habit of using a lot of the same actors. He calls it Fukuda Gumi. It's his group of people he relies on, who he brings in all of the time. And the two main voices in that are Muro Tsuyoshi, or who I always call Paul because of his eponymous role in Once Upon a Crime as Paul the Mouse, and Jiro Sato. And these guys are very funny. They don't get a lot in this, but having such competent tertiary characters really helps the movie flow, and people can play off them and they have a good impact on their scenes. There's also, like I say, a bunch of other smaller characters played by some big roles. Mio Imada is in there near the start, and we've got Yumi, of course, who's in a lot of Fukuda movies, and she has one of the best line deliveries in the whole movie. Really, really good. So there's not a performance in this that I can really complain about, outside of maybe Hirotaka could be a little bit more emotional and a little bit more of a energetic and likable character. But I think they were going for something specific with that. And so now that we've talked about basically the elements of the movie that I think make it good, the last thing to talk about is where it sits among rom-coms. As I said at the start of the video, I have a real problem with most rom-coms. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've always had this issue when I watch romantic movies. Understandably, back in the day, not only here but in Japan too, and other parts of the world, romance was very different. Falling in love was very different. The way people got married and got together was very different. You know, there were arranged marriages, there were love at first sight. There's a lot of very surface level reasons why people fall in love, and it feels very fickle, and it doesn't really match my idea of what love is. To quote an example, Meet Me in St. Louis is one of my favourite films, but the romance in that movie is so surface level. But that's just how it was at the time. And so you can kind of excuse it in old movies a lot of the time. Judy Garland's character sees John Truitt through her window, he moves in next door, and she's already in love with him. They have one conversation at a party and they're already practically married. I don't know what their relationship is like. I don't know if they're compatible or if they get along. It's a very kind of surface level, you know, they're attractive, we're both attractive, we live nearby, and he's nice. And that's all there is to it. But I think there's more to love than that. So it doesn't really represent love for me. In the same with It Happened One Night, which is the Clark Gable rom-com from the 1920s, 1930s. And that was the same, where I felt like there was no real chemistry between these two characters. They didn't know each other. They didn't necessarily have anything common. They didn't have common interests. What would they do together? But it's a different time. And so old rom-coms definitely rub me the wrong way. But modern rom-coms have a whole different set of problems too, where characters will actively dislike each other and hate each other. And the value between them often comes from what they can offer them or whether they're nice to them rather than their interests and their personalities matching and connecting, which to me is so much more important. So when you watch a lot of modern movies, you'll have those scenes right at the end where they're at the airport and they rush out and they're like, "Don't leave, I love you," even though they've spent the whole movie fighting and arguing. And it's like, you know they're going to get together, and if the movie continued, they'd fight and argue again, and then they break up, and it's very frustrating. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and this is a light spoiler, but I'm going to try and keep it very vague, just so you don't get anything spoiled about that movie if you plan to see it. But in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, they have these two characters who are in a relationship, and they break up, and then they kind of start to get back together. And it's like an endless cycle where they end up in the same places, where one of them is distant and the other one is jealous, and they fight and they argue, and they don't have anything common, so they don't do anything together. And then something happens that allows them to be in a situation, you know, where they're able to do that again, and it happens again. And I feel like that's what a lot of these modern rom-coms are like. You know, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is supposed to be, I think, kind of a sad movie. Tragic movie in many ways. So they're playing the same things very differently. But so many rom-coms are obviously not supposed to be sad. They're supposed to be triumphant and excitable and happy. And so when I watch these movies and I think, you know, like Romeo and Juliet, they're going to get together, they've never had a conversation. How do we know that they're compatible? How do we know that their personalities meet? They meet and they say they love each other and then they talk sweet nothings and it doesn't mean anything. That's not love to me. But Wotakoi does it a bit differently. And I'm not saying this is the only movie to do it differently. I certainly think over the last 10 years, movies have been getting closer and closer to what Wotakoi is like. A lot of the rom-coms you see will be more like this. But in Wotakoi, the characters not only know each other well, but they have great chemistry, outside of Hirotaka's performance being a little bit bland. But they have similar interests, they have things they both like to do together, they have things they can talk about together, and they like talking to each other, they like doing things together. And that's the basis of what makes a good relationship to me. What makes love exciting is that these two people didn't just connect sexually, they didn't just connect from looks, they didn't just connect from life or business reasons or because they were nice to them and nobody else has been nice to them before. That should be the bare minimum. But instead they're getting together because they like the same things and they like to see each other succeed in these interests and engage with each other, and it's very exciting and very cute. But of course it's a rom-com, right? So there's drama to be had. But that's also a really big benefit to me for this movie, because the drama in this isn't about, oh, well, they don't get along, or one of them has done something evil, or, you know, they've got a real serious issue about things that really they can gloss over, but they can never solve, like in a lot of rom-coms. And it's not because they don't know each other well and they're finding out more and not liking it. The reason why they have drama is because of a few things. Narumi's self-confidence issues, Hirotaka feeling like he doesn't have anything to offer, and a much bigger issue, one that I think is very relatable, is this issue where neither of them know how to push the relationship forward. They both want to move to the next step, but neither of them knows how. And when the other person does, they feel confused, and as a result, they both feel like neither of them is wanted. And that to me is a much more realistic problem to have in a relationship where people are actually in love. If they the reason why we don't see this in other rom-coms usually is because the reasons why they fall out are because their personalities aren't compatible. This isn't that their personalities aren't compatible, it's that they're compatible but they don't know what to do. And I think that is especially relatable for people who are in these otaku or geek spaces where you've had maybe less social interaction with that kind of situation or similar such things. And as a result, it's difficult to know what the boundaries are, to know when you can go in for the case, to know when you can ask, and even know how to ask. And instead, the movie portrays them as going away and doing their solo songs, their internal monologues, where they're like, why did I not say this? He's going to think this, and I'm not going to be able to tell him that I actually like him and I do want to do things with him, and now I've scared him off because I panicked. And I think it's really meaningful, and it makes their relationship very sweet and very wholesome, and it's very cute to watch it. So outside of the songs, which I love, and outside of the comedy, which I think is a lot of fun, and the performances, which are great, the reason why this movie holds a special place in my heart is because that romantic angle really speaks to me, because not only is it, I think, a beautiful relationship depicted, but it's also one that has real problems that are resolved in a sweet way. And I love as well that they kind of have the stereotypical, other couple in the rom-com who aren't naturally compatible, who fight a lot. And they show them screaming at each other and arguing in one scene, juxtaposed to our two leads. And it kind of sums it up where it's like, for all of the stuff that they've got going on and the issues they have, at least they don't hate each other. At least they know that there's love between them. Could the movie have done more of that? Maybe. But I love the way that it sets it up. And I think that is the key emotion coming across. And I think movies want you to feel. And I think the best movies are the ones that make you feel. And that scene really makes me feel. The scenes where those feelings are expressed. And I think it's a little bit bittersweet, but it's happy, it's hopeful, it's cute. And it shows that, ultimately, if those are the only issues you have, then you know that you're in the right place. And you can still get there, you can still go for it. It's very cute. And as I say, a lot more modern rom-coms are kind of going this way, where they have characters who have actual connections, who like a lot of the same stuff, who really get along. But there's been decades of Hollywood movies where that has not been the case, where every rom-com is people who hate each other, or people who like each other for very surface reasons or for whatever, and then making it work. And so I love to see ones where the relationship and the romance and the love between them and the compatibility between them especially feels real. And so that's essentially my review. This is a movie I love. I think it's got tons to offer, and I think it just needs to find the right audience. And I think that could be you, dear viewer. If you're watching my channel and you like all the movies I've spoken about, we might have similar tastes. And so if I like it, you might like it. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to watch it. And I think it is a beautiful movie. It's very funny. It's very energetic. It's got great songs. It's got good energy. And it's got some top-tier performances. Mitsuki will blow you away, I feel like. And hopefully you feel the same about the romance as me. But before we go, I'd like to ask, because they're so popular, something like It Happened One Night, is that what love is to you? If you don't agree with me, is that what love is to you? Do you feel the same way about rom-coms? I've spoken to people who I know feel the same way as me, but if you don't feel the same way as me, why is that? What is it about those other rom-coms that means love to you? What is it that spells love to you that I'm not seeing? And conversely, when you watch a movie like this that has a romance this way, do you not see that as love, or is that just a different form of it for you? And equally, if you're somebody who feels the same as me, I'd love to hear you reach out and hear what you have to say, because like I said, I think it's obviously not just me. I think modern filmmakers changing to having more rom-coms where relationships are more the forefront shows that there are definitely an audience of people like me who grew up the same era as me, who are now becoming creators who are making content that appeals to that demographic. So it probably isn't just me, but regardless, the reason to watch this movie obviously is Mitsuki. She's the greatest, she's the best. Every other reason, pointless. Watch it for Mitsuki. She's a star, and watch all of her other movies. You've probably seen her in other stuff as well. She's been in some big dramas. She's been in a lot of TV shows. She's amazing. She's got great albums too. Listen to them. And enjoy. I think she's the best. Now, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you want. If you don't want to do that, then that's fine. If you don't like the video, then you probably shouldn't do those things. But if you want to do it anyway, I'm not going to tell you not to. But I'll catch you in the next one, where I have a fun topic to talk about. I'm also sorry for the delay, but I kind of forgot to make videos. It wasn't even a motivational problem this time. I just forgot that that was something that I had to do. But I'll catch you in the next one. Hopefully it won't be as long. Arrivederci.